Hello nerds, geeks, beings, and freaks alike. It's me, RandomDragon.EXE, and it's Spooky Month, the month of all things creepy and ghostly. And speaking of ghosts, I love to engage myself in watching anything spooky, or not to mention anything that has ghosts in it around this time, to watching Ghostbusters and Paranormal Activity, to heck, maybe even visiting a few ghost levels in Super Mario games, because dang it, they're fun. And speaking of games and ghosts, I love to play Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon during this time. Well, I like to play it anytime, really, but I just love the game this much. It's that good, in my opinion. However, the game is often overlooked and at most receives a little too much hate in favor of the first game. And I can admit, I can understand a few of the reasons why. The original game is a lot more spookier with its darker muted colors, and that alone makes it have a lot more atmosphere. And heck, the very first cutscene takes place on a literal dark and stormy night. And besides, you know what they say.
Beat the classics.
I'll say.
It's no wonder people love this game, but I think that Dark Moon is a really good game too. Sure, it has some flaws as any game would, but overall, it's still a good game in its own right, and dang it, I'll die on this hill. Alright, maybe I shouldn't word it like that. But all in all, I like this game, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about what makes Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon an underrated gem in the Luigi's Mansion series. Of course, there's one big disclaimer that I kinda have to admit. That I actually haven't played the original Luigi's Mansion on the GameCube, although I have seen some Let's Plays of it here on YouTube. And yeah, I know I am well aware of how this looks, but when you think about it, it just means that I'm not a bit blinded by the nostalgia that some people might have for the original. And this is not to say that having nostalgia for the first game is bad. No, I'm just saying that I'm able to view this game with a more open mind. Now, with that being said, let's buckle up and get ready to be sucked into the ghostly beauty of Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. The game starts out with a guy in his lab who's working alongside some ghosts he's befriended in Evershade Valley. Then we see King Boo who's free and he seeks revenge by shattering the Dark Moon that makes the ghosts hostile. This then forces him to seek shelter into his bunker. After that, we see a somewhat spooky introduction to Luigi's home. We see him resting from a seemingly long day of being Luigi. This is actually kind of nice to see as, well, A, we get a small little glimpse into Luigi's life. B, we see him not be so afraid for once. C, I actually almost forgot to say that this is actually some pretty good graphics, and it still looks good to this very day. Oh, and most importantly is D. The rank, as in the D rank mansion is actually canon. Yeah, Nintendo basically just said screw you to anyone who got an S and A rank in the first game. And sorry, completionists. But anyways, Egad wakes him up, and Luigi is actually kind of forced into helping him capture the ghosts and to restore the Dark Moon. It's very simple and straightforward, just like the original. However, there are a few differences with the gameplay and locations. For one, instead of one large mansion, we have 5 locations that have different themes, as well as puzzles carried around that theme. For example, the Gloomy Manor is the starter mansion that has simple mechanics based around the new gadgets, such as the dark light, the strobe bulb, and setting fire to spiderwebs. In terms of the new tech we have this time, we get introduced to the dark light. It can turn invisible things visible and take things and people out of paintings. It can also help in combat to get ghosts to basically expose themselves so that they can get properly sucked off by Luigi. No, I am not rephrasing that. The Haunted Towers is based around overgrown plants and watering them to achieve certain effects. Old Clockworks is based around gears, gadgets, and gizmos that are reminiscent of clocks and their inner workings. The Secret Mine is centered around ice mechanics, melting ice, slippery floors, and reflective ice. And finally, the Treacherous Mansion is based on all the previous themes and their mechanics. It serves as kind of a final test of the skills that the player now knows. Now, this is all well and good, and most people like the change to explore multiple locations as opposed to a single mansion. Sure, the gameplay can be a bit repetitive at times, but the game makes up for that with the different themes to see and their secrets to uncover. Every location is unique with its own theme and mechanics, yet they are all united under being infested with the hostile ghosts. There are also these introduction cutscenes that play to give the player a good scope of the location that properly sets them up. It gives a good overall feel for the location without even taking a step inside them, which is honestly kind of a feat. Now, the biggest change to the gameplay is that we're introduced to missions. It's arguably the main point that many people discuss when talking about Dark Moon's flaws. However, I would argue that the mission structure isn't actually all that bad. I think the mission structure offers a lot more clarity than the original game. For example, if a player hasn't played the original game in a long time, they would have to go backtrack and keep checking the map to find out what their next move is. Here, the game has cutscenes before missions that fills them in, so they know what to do. This gives the player a very clear goal to work toward, and it provides more structure. So even if the player hasn't played Dark Moon in a very long time, they can instantly pick up where they left off, almost as if they didn't lose out on anything when they were gone. It also helps that there's a map on the dual screen where the player can see their location and the floors all the time, instead of constantly halting the game entirely to check. It's very intuitive to the 3DS, and it makes it a little bit more immersive to have a map right there in front of them. In terms of the bosses, there are now Possessor Ghosts introduced that possess something for Luigi to fight. The first boss is a giant spider, which is arguably the best boss. As the boss continues, we see the stage develop into this interconnected web of a puzzle. It's really captivating to wade through it and watch it unfold as you beat it. It's just overall a really great first boss for the Gloomy Manor, and it's just a really great puzzle to figure out. Now for the next boss, it's basically themed around stairs.
Ah, my old enemy. Stairs.
Okay, seriously, what's up with Nintendo and endless stairs? We've had enough of the stairs from 64, and now it's taking over Luigi's Mansion 2. The bad thing here is that this time, there's no BLJing out of this one. Instead, the player has to guess which stairs are the right path. I'll admit the eerie staircase can be a bit of a slog to get through, as it is based on luck. However, if the player pays attention, they can look ahead and look at the flames as they indicate which path is safe. So it's not that bad in that regard. There is one positive that comes to mind with this section, and that's the music. The music during this part is actually really tense and provides a good build up to the boss. The music gets progressively quicker, and it's easy to get carried away and make a hasty decision. So this section is actually pretty okay for what it is. The actual boss itself is just a giant set of stairs that lunges at the player. It's a very easy boss, and I'll admit, it could have been a little more challenging. But hey, at least it's pretty darn near impossible to die, so you don't have to start all over again. That's a pretty good bright side. Also, its design is pretty cool, and it's an okay fight. The old Clockworks boss is basically just a gauntlet of ghosts. All the player has to do is just survive and work their way up to the Possessor Ghost. It's a good way to rack up some money and see how many ghosts you can wrangle at once just for some fun. The aesthetic of the level is pretty cool. You're on top of a giant clock and the hands move. Just get out of the way in time and you'll be fine. Overall, it's an okay boss. Gee, it kind of reminds me of another level in a Mario game inspired by a clock and its inner workings. Anyways, back to Super Luigi's Dark Moon. Dark Moon. Moving on, the ice boss is a really cool boss. Pun intended. This time, you have to aim at the ghost's face and make him eat a bomb 3 times. I guess ghosts do have a weakness other than the poltergust.
Bombs!
But in all seriousness, even though this boss is kinda hard and at most divisive due to the strategy involving the timing, you gotta admit that the gameplay change is very creative. It can be fun to go all out and shoot the ghost as willy-nilly as you can in that first phase. One thing I will say is that this boss is about practice. The more practice you get with it, the more fun you'll have, which I think is a pretty fair assessment. The Big Boo battle is a great reference to the Colossus battle from the first game. Heck, you even defeat him in a similar way by popping him. Although this time, the boos have to be thrown into the cages on that train. It really tests the player's boo-flicking skills to this point. The Big Boo itself has a few new moves, but they're fairly easy to dodge in order to beat him. It makes for a pretty solid fight with the mashup between new and old game mechanics. The night battle starts off pretty slow with the knights homing in on Luigi. It requires some strategy to get all the knights on the same rug, so that part may be a bit of a challenge. But when it's very defeated, a massive knight appears, and this is where the fight peaks. It feels really intimidating when you see it on your first playthrough. It's also really grand in its presentation. The boss's music is also amazing to listen to, and it really complements the level. Overall, this makes for an awesome fight for the final Dark Moon piece. King Boo's final battle is a rather simple yet entertaining boss. Just make sure he hits himself with the balls he has and he goes down. One thing is for sure, he doesn't go down that easy. Each phase gets increasingly difficult. From the small battle stage to his landing abilities, he throws all that he can to the player. Then there's a section where the player has to run away from him in the Indiana Jones style while avoiding the traps. That section can be pretty challenging, especially in the last two phases, so it makes for a great final boss against King Boo. As I've said before, Dark Moon has some pretty good music. There are a plethora of tracks that are worth listening to. The most recognized track is the library piano, and it's a really great piece. It first appears in the library mini-boss, and it's a nice backdrop to the fight. It also serves as a leitmotif throughout the game in the bonus infiltration missions where they sound slightly different to each other. Then the tune comes back full force in the level Paranormal Chaos. It's just a really nice way to piece together the game and make it feel cohesive. The mansions themselves have really nice music that sets the tone for them, and they stand out in different ways. Notable ones include Gloomy Manor's music, which sounds pretty calm and inviting. Old Clockwork's sounds very fancy and almost Victorian in nature. And The Secret Mines sounds very pretty, yet still very mysterious. The boss themes, as mentioned before, are pretty good too. The best ones being the Spider Boss, the Clock Tower Boss, and obviously the Night Boss. All this to say, the music is really catchy and it's really nice to listen to. When it comes to Dark Moon, there's not a lot of scary atmosphere as it's more lighthearted, but there's still some small spooky charm to it. Sure, there's no genuinely disturbing stuff, like Bowser's head being detached from his body, or children dying in their sleep, but there are a few moments that have some atmosphere. For one, there's some really good ambience that plays in certain parts of missions. For example, there's some outside windy ambience in the first mission of Gloomy Manor, and another ambience for the interior of it too. That same interior ambience even returns in the Spider Boss mission just before it. There's also a bunch of other places where ambience plays, but it'll be way too many to count. So if you want to hear them, go check them out. They sound very neat. Even though it's far from an actual horror game, the game has a few cutscenes that can slightly make the player feel uneasy, or flat out make them jump, as they can catch them off guard on that first playthrough. Like the Possessor sneaking up on the window in the level before the ice boss, King Boo watching Luigi from behind the shadows in the door to the treacherous mansion, or the better one, when King Boo moves in that final security image. And yeah, I'll admit, King Boo moving in the picture did kinda get me, but can you blame me? I was just so focused on finishing the game, and I was in the game zone. And when I'm playing, I don't want to be messed with when I'm in the game zone. So of course, I'm gonna jump a little when I'm so focused on the screen. Um, Anyways, let's move on to the next thing. The characters are very expressive, which gives them so much personality. The animations on Luigi are honestly adorable, and they nailed his timid yet brave personality and his clumsiness to a T. Even his interactions with the toads are cute and entertaining to watch.
Uh-oh. Huh? Yahoo! Oh.
EGAT is just as friendly and enthusiastic about his ghost research as always, although he can be a little too overboard with checking up on him for his safety. I swear that ringtone is basically stuck in a loop in my head now because of it. Well, I'm not complaining, it slaps. The ghosts this time around are very expressive as well, and each type has its own personality which drives its gameplay. For example, the greenies are clever troublemakers, and try to come up with ways to avoid the strobe bulb, which makes battling them the most varied of the bunch. Creepers are puddles of goo that lie in wait for Luigi to get caught within them. They can be found on floors or drop down from ceilings. The Hiders are kind of like the twins from the original. They're cunning and playful little fellas who make Luigi play hide and seek and guessing games to see where they are. Slammers are kind of the opposite. They have the most direct approach by using their brute strength to pound Luigi. Gobbers are like a combination of Mr. Lugs and Garbage Can Ghosts from the original. They like to eat food and things and will proudly throw their digestive goo at Luigi, which he has to avoid. Sneakers are evasive little guys, so they're like boos on steroids. They like to go behind Luigi and scare him to release any ghost he's currently sucking on. And speaking of boos, they're in the game too. They like to hide in invisible objects. The dark light can reveal the object, and it encourages the player to pay attention to the details of the rooms they are in. The Polterpup is also adorable and playful. As repetitive as his missions can be, you've got to remember that he's been infected by the Dark Moon, and he's not himself because of it. He seems to have a small side story, and by the end of the game, he looks like he's sorry, and Luigi ultimately forgives him and adopts him. All in all, this makes for some really great gameplay. It's very diverse and makes the player use their head for a great gaming experience. Ultimately, what makes Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon great is its ingenuity. Its utilization of the variety of ghosts gives it a creative and unique experience. The same can be said for the mission structure, as it's pretty engaging to be able to sort through the missions. I think the best way to sum it up is that its greatest strength is also its main point that people disagree with, and it makes the game a little divisive in the Luigi's Mansion community. But it isn't too bad. Everybody has their preferences, and that is perfectly valid. If someone wants some atmosphere and spooks, they could play the original. If they want some more creativity, go for Dark Moon. If they want something that combines the elements of both, they should go play the third game. All are all valid. I mean, I love spooky stuff, and I want to play the original. I mean, I'm planning on getting the remake, but hey, I'd still like to experience the original for myself, you know? But hey, for now, I'm pretty happy with Dark Moon, and for what it has to offer. I'm just glad that there's gamers out there who appreciate it for what it has. And I hope all of you can at least understand why gamers think it's pretty neat as well. With all that being said, this is RandomDragon.EXE, wishing you a very spooky October, signing off.